The Emperor didn't abandon me. He just stopped pretending to care. The Medica's incense still clings to me, thick with sterilizer and false hope, but underneath it, I can smell the truth rot. It began as a cut barely more than a scratch earned during a boarding action against a heretic vessel in the Vorder's reach. The blade that grazed me wasn't chaos forged, not warp-tainted, just a jagged shard of metal from a collapsing bulkhead. I remember the smell of burnt flesh as the plasma coil detonated, the screams of my comrades as void fire took the deck. I remember thinking I was lucky. Now I understand luck has a sense of humor. The wound sealed within a day, the skin growing hard and pale, almost waxen. The ship's chirurgeons praised the Emperor for such swift recovery. They said my body's resilience was a sign of his favor. I believed them, how could I not? We were soldiers of the Imperium, and faith was all that kept us from screaming in the dark. But faith is fragile, thinner than the film of skin over a scab, and when the scab split, something else breathed beneath it. It began whispering on the third night, not voices, vibrations, like the low hum of a reactor through the deck plating. I thought it was the engines, until I realized it was coming from me, from under my ribs. Each pulse carried warmth like fever. I couldn't sleep. Every breath tasted wrong, coppery and sweet. The next morning, the others noticed the smell. Sergeant Karen joked that I'd been rolling in corpse starch again. I laughed with him, because laughter is a shield. But when he turned away, I saw the expression on the medic's face, a mixture of confusion and fear. They sent me for examination. The scanners stuttered, their Auspex readings jumping between data fields that didn't exist in any Imperial codex. Possible contamination, the tech priest muttered before sealing me in quarantine. Days passed. My wound no longer looked like flesh. It had darkened, the skin mottled green and gray, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I tried to clean it, but the tissue resisted, like it wanted to stay dirty. The smell thickened, coating the air like oil. When I prayed, the words stuck in my throat. It felt like the Emperor had turned his gaze away. The whispers grew louder. At first, they were random meaningless noise, but then they began to form words. Breathe, feed, endure. They spoke like old friends, gentle but insistent. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound wasn't external. It lived inside my blood. I stopped eating, but my body didn't weaken. I stopped sleeping, but exhaustion never came. I watched my reflection in the cell's metal wall, eyes sunken, skin pale, veins black as void. When the door finally opened, it wasn't the Medica who entered. It was a robed man with a respirator mask and parchment seals of purity stitched across his chest. An inquisitorial agent. His voice rasped through the Vox grill. Subject 12. Symptoms consistent with warp corruption. Do you renounce the infection and seek absolution? I nodded, too desperate to speak. Then pray, he said. I tried. Emperor, forgive me, I tried. But the words fell apart, rotting as they left my tongue. The agent drew a bolt pistol and pressed it against my forehead. He began reciting the litany of purity, voice calm, unshaken. I thought it would end there, but something deep within me refused. My body convulsed, instinctive, primal. I grabbed his wrist. The moment our skin touched, I felt it, the warmth spreading from my arm into his. His eyes widened, and I heard bones crack. Flesh bubbled beneath his armor as lesions bloomed across his skin. He screamed only once. When I released him, he was already dissolving, his voice still echoing through the Vox in wet static. I watched in horror as my fingers not mine absorbed the blood from the floor. My veins lit with sickly green light, and the whispers laughed, a sound that shook the walls. The door sealed behind me, alarms wailing, but the sound barely reached me. The pain had stopped. In its place was clarity. Every breath filled my lungs with warmth, every heartbeat stronger than before. The decay wasn't killing me, it was changing me. That night I dreamed of a world shrouded in fog. Mountains of bone, rivers of bile, a sky heavy with rot and life intertwined. On the horizon a figure stood vast, cloaked in filth and radiance. His presence filled me with peace so complete it hurt. He spoke without sound, and endurance is beauty. Decay is truth. Come home. When I awoke, the ship was silent. The alarms had stopped. My cell door was open. Beyond it, I could smell the crew, their sweat, their blood, their fear. The scent was intoxicating. My stomach growled, but not with hunger, with need. I stumbled into the corridor, barefoot, leaving green footprints that hissed where they touched metal. The walls seemed to breathe with me. The whispers guided me forward. Breathe, feed, endure. I reached the main deck. The bodies were everywhere, crewmen, guards. Medica, all lying in twisted shapes, their faces serene, their wounds flowering with mold. I should have felt horror, but all I felt was recognition. Their blood was the same color as my veins. Their stillness hummed with the same pulse that lived in me. And then I heard him again, the voice from my dream. Louder now, closer. You have served long enough in ignorance. Accept the gift. My reflection in the observation port stared back at me. My eyes were gone, replaced by black pits weeping green light. My skin no longer resembled flesh, it was armor, cracked and pitted, leaking echo from beneath the seams. I raised my hands, and the fingers ended in claws of bone. My breath came out as mist, carrying spores that glittered in the ship's failing lumen lights. I should have screamed. I laughed instead, because for the first time, I felt alive. I didn't realize how quiet death could be until I walked among it. The ship was a cathedral of silence now, lights dimmed to greenish embers, corridors slick with condensation and decay. The air tasted metallic, thick with rotten ozone. My footsteps echoed wetly against the deck, though I no longer felt the weight of flesh. Something heavier carried me forward. Purpose, maybe. Or inevitability. Bodies lay where life had simply stopped. I recognized faces, crewmen who'd shared their rations, a priest who once blessed the engines. All of them changed now, their skin gray and waxy, lips twisted into faint smiles. Some were still moving, twitching as growths of fungus pushed through their uniforms. A few turned their heads toward me, mouths opening to speak, but no sound came, only a sigh that smelled of sweet decay. I should have pitied them. Instead, I felt envy. The pain had left me entirely. My wound, once a rotting pit, was now sealed by armor like tissue, mottled with green and brown. My heart no longer beat as it once did. Instead, I felt a slow, rhythmic thrum pulsing through every vein, in perfect harmony with something vast and distant. Each breath drew in not air, but life, thousands of invisible spores swirling in the dark. I could feel them singing beneath my skin. I found the command deck sealed. Heavy blast doors half melted from internal detonation. I tore them apart like cloth. Inside, the captain sat in his throne, bolter still clutched in skeletal fingers. His armor was polished once, gilded and adorned with purity seals. Now it was fused to his body. The seals hung limp, unreadable, their ink dissolved by rot. His eyes were glassy but aware. When I stepped closer, he tried to speak, his jaw creaking as a voice rasped from the ruin of his throat. "What are you?" I didn't answer. The words wouldn't come, only a low vibration that made the lumen lights flicker. He raised his weapon with trembling arms, but before he could fire, the metal corroded, crumbling to powder in his hands. He screamed not from pain, but from realization. I touched his shoulder and he stilled. Flesh softened beneath my palm, sinking, merging. In moments, the captain was gone, absorbed into the chair, his bones melting into the structure of the command throne. His last expression was peace. The whisper returned, not from within but from everywhere. He served. You endure. The cycle begins anew. On my knees buckled. The deck vibrated beneath me. Through the viewport, the stars swam, each one pulsing faintly green, as if infected by my gaze. The ship's engines roared to life. I wasn't touching the controls, yet I could feel them responding to my thoughts, my heartbeat guiding their rhythm. The lament was dead, but its corpse obeyed. As we drifted through the void, I began to hear other sounds, voices carried on currents of static. At first, I thought them echoes of madness, but no. These were hymns, deep and resonant, layered like the sound of 1,000 diseased lungs breathing in unison. Words emerged from the noise. Rot endures. Flesh fails. Only the gift persists. Something answered from within me. The ship's voxcaster crackled, and a face appeared in the flickering light of a dying cogitator, a figure wrapped in corroded plate, helm shaped like a skull. The mark of the XIV Legion burned into the metal. His voice was slow, wet, and certain. "You hear it, don't you, little one? The song of Father Nurgle." I couldn't speak. My throat felt clogged with warmth. "Your vessel drifts on the edge of the warp. We felt your sickness bloom." He leaned closer, his eyes like festering suns. "You are becoming." I tried to deny it, but the reflection in the glass said otherwise. My armor had grown thicker, crusted with layered corrosion and bloated with gas pockets that released faint green mist when I moved. My hands were no longer flesh at all, but calloused, bone-plated claws that flexed with alien rhythm. I could feel organs shifting inside me, rearranging themselves into something functional yet utterly alien. "I am still human," I forced out, though the words sounded hollow. The warrior's laughter echoed through the vox like the cracking of bone. "Human, oh child, humanity is a fever that burns itself away. You are the cure." The connection cut. The ship trembled. My chest ached, swelling with heat until I collapsed to my knees. The skin beneath my armor split, releasing streams of pus that sizzled on the deck. I screamed, but the sound became laughter, thick, guttural, unbidden. It shook the air around me, and from that laughter came music, the rhythm of decay itself. Then the ship's alarms screamed once more. "Warp breach detected." The hull shuddered, reality folding inward. Through the flickering viewport, I saw it, a fleet unlike any I'd ever seen. Gigantic, rusted, alive. Engines belching clouds of green vapor, hulls covered in lesions that wept light. The Death Guard. My heart, or whatever replaced it, thundered in my chest. The whispers roared home. One of their ships loomed close, a vessel of ancient design, scarred and swollen with disease. Vox interference filled the air as a deep voice spoke directly into my mind. "The Plaguefather welcomes his lost child." I tried to move, to flee, but every part of me obeyed something else. The Lement's thrusters adjusted course on their own. My hands trembled, my veins burning. The closer they came, the louder the hum grew until it became unbearable. And then silence. A shadow eclipsed the viewport. I saw them, towering figures in corroded ceramite, icons of rot carved into their armor, eyes glowing with sickly light. The Death Guard, my brothers. The airlock doors opened without command. I felt the pull of the void. Then the warmth of warp light spilling in. The largest of them stepped forward, his armor groaning under its own weight. He carried a scythe taller than I was, its blade dripping with ichor that steamed even in vacuum. His voice was soft, almost kind. "Fear not, child. You've already endured what most cannot." "Mortarion," I whispered. He tilted his head. "No, one of his sons. But he watches always." Behind him, others waited, hulking giants whose armor pulsed like diseased flesh, flies buzzing in clouds around them. They didn't draw weapons. They simply observed. I tried to stand straight, but my knees gave out. My body was changing faster now, bones reshaping beneath armor that had become part of me. Every breath was heavy, wet, alive. The warrior extended his hand, a gauntlet encrusted with rust and barnacles. "The Imperium fed you lies, little one, but the truth is merciful. You've been chosen by the only God who loves without judgment." I hesitated, staring at that decaying hand. My reflection stared back from his arm, all pale, swollen, something crawling under the skin. My mouth opened, and words spilled out before I could stop them. "What happens if I accept?" He smiled. "Then you endure forever." The ship's gravity failed. The deck tilted. My vision blurred as the world dissolved into green mist. The last thing I saw was the warrior's hand closing around mine, and the whisper of 1,000 voices rising into song. When I awoke, I wasn't on my ship anymore. The air was thick, humid, alive. Each breath carried the weight of decay and sweetness so dense it coated my tongue like oil. I tried to sit up, but my body resisted, heavy and foreign. The deck beneath me was not metal, it was something softer, pulsing faintly beneath my palms, as if the ship itself was breathing. I stared down and saw that the floor was slick with mucus sheen, the veins of the vessel faintly glowing beneath a translucent surface that looked disturbingly organic. The walls curved inward like the ribs of some colossal beast. Rust and fungus formed patterns across the bulkheads, but it wasn't random. There was structure intent in the rot. Every patch of corrosion looked placed, grown with care, as if the ship were cultivating itself. From somewhere deep within, I could hear the muffled thump of vast engines that didn't just burn fuel but fed. The smell was overwhelming, sweet, earthy, almost comforting if not for the metallic undercurrent of blood. Voices drifted through the corridors, deep and resonant, layered over one another in what might have been song or sermon. I recognized fragments of imperial litanies, twisted and rewritten. Words once meant for the emperor now repurposed for something older, softer, and infinitely more terrible. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled under unfamiliar weight. My armor, or what remained of it, had fused to my body completely. Beneath its corroded surface, I could feel warmth pulse breath. It was no longer something I wore. It was something I was. When I touched the chest plate, I felt a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, not entirely mine. Then I noticed the sound. Wet, rhythmic breathing, coming from behind me. I turned. A figure knelt in the doorway, a giant wrapped in corroded ceramite, his armor swollen with growths of fungus and tubes pulsing like veins. Flies crawled across his helm, drinking from the moisture that gathered along its edges. His respirator hissed with every exhale, a grotesque parody of life support. He didn't move for several moments, only studied me. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and patient, like gravel ground underfoot. "You survived the crossing. Few do without the Father's favor." I swallowed, or tried to. My throat was raw, coated in phlegm. Where am I?" The warrior gestured around us. "Aboard the Bloom of Despair, a vessel of the Death Guard. Your old flesh lies far behind, little one. Here you are being remade. I didn't ask for this." A pause. The flies between us hummed louder, as if laughing. "Neither did we." He stepped closer, and the deck groaned beneath his weight. The sigil of Nurgle gleamed faintly on his pauldron, a three-ringed mark of endless rot and renewal. His armor's surface writhed slightly, as if tiny organisms lived within it, burrowing through the corrosion. He extended one massive hand toward me. "Tell me," he said, "when you fought for the Imperium, did you ever feel whole?" I wanted to say yes, but the memory of those endless campaigns came back, the cold hunger. The orders shouted through static, the faces of the dying filed as data, not names. The way hope had long since been replaced by routine. I hesitated, and that was enough of an answer. The warrior's tone softened. "The Imperium demands suffering, yet offers no meaning. The Father gives meaning to all suffering, even yours." "I'm not like you," I said, though it sounded more like a question than defiance. He chuckled, a sound that rattled through the walls. "You are like us. You just haven't stopped pretending yet." He turned and gestured for me to follow. My legs obeyed before my mind did. We moved through the corridors of the ship, past shrines made of bone and rust, each one adorned with icons of rot. Servitors, if they could still be called that, shambled between alcoves, their flesh dripping, their augmetics overgrown with moss and coral. Some whispered hymns through broken vox grills, others carried barrels of viscous liquid that reeked of both sanctity and disease. As we passed, they bowed, not to the warrior, to me. I wanted to scream that I wasn't one of them, that I was still human, but the words caught in my throat. Because part of me, the deeper, quieter part, knew it was a lie. The air didn't burn my lungs. The rot didn't sicken me. It comforted me. We entered a vast chamber, a cathedral grown inside a corpse. Rusted organ pipes rose into the shadows above, dripping condensation that smelled faintly of vinegar and decay. At its center sat a figure that made even the Death Guard warrior seem small. He was a mountain of armor and filth, his body a cathedral of decay. Where his flesh met metal, worms moved lazily, fat and content. Flies gathered in hollows around his helm. He turned toward me slowly, the motion heavy, deliberate. "So this is the new Bloom." His voice was like wet thunder, calm yet commanding. "The one who endured alone." The warrior beside me bowed. He resisted the culling, Lord Ferox. The Father's mark took root regardless. Lord Ferox leaned forward, the weight of his presence filling the chamber. "Do you understand what has happened to you, child?" I shook my head. "You have been chosen," he said. Not for strength, not for purity, but for the one virtue the Imperium cannot abide: acceptance. You embraced what was given. That is the first lesson of decay. I wanted to shout at him, to demand my life back, but the longer I looked at him, the more impossible that seemed. The stench that rolled off him was unbearable, yet not repulsive. It was honest. Beneath it was life, vibrant and unending. The rot pulsed in time with my heart. You will fight with us, he said. You will bring our gospel to the unclean worlds. You will spread the Father's love to those still enslaved by false light. No, I said, though the word came out weak. Lord Varax's laughter was deep and patient. Oh, you will. You already have. Every breath you take carries his spores. Every heartbeat is his prayer. He rose, towering, his bulk casting me into shadow. But first you must be baptized. Before I could react, 2 plague marines seized me from behind. Their grip was iron wrapped in flesh. They dragged me toward the altar, where a vat of thick, bubbling liquid waited, green, opaque, alive. The smell was indescribable, like meat and earth and rot and something holy. I struggled, but my strength failed me. The warrior who'd found me watched in silence, his expression unreadable behind the veil of his helm. They pushed me under. The liquid filled my mouth, my lungs, my eyes. It wasn't drowning, it was absorption. The substance crept beneath my skin, through my veins, into my mind. I saw flashes, planets burning, cities falling into pestilence, millions praying for salvation that would never come. And through it all, one presence, vast and kind, whispering through the filth, all things end. All things begin again. When they pulled me out, I was not the same. My skin had hardened, cracked. My vision swam with color. But not as I knew it. Everything shimmered with the living energy of decay. I could see the life in death, the purpose in entropy. Lord Varax approached and placed one massive, dripping hand on my shoulder. Rise, brother. Welcome to the Death Guard. I stood. The chamber roared with the sound of chanting voices, and the flies filled the air like falling snow. My heart beat once, slow and deliberate, and the hum of the ship echoed in reply. For the first time since my infection, I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. I woke to the sound of bells, deep, rusted tones rolling through the hull like the heartbeat of something ancient. The air was thick enough to chew. My armor creaked with every breath, leaking vapor that glowed faintly green in the half-light. The flies never left anymore. They clung to me like icons, loyal and patient, feeding on the moisture that seeped from my flesh. I was not disgusted. I was not even surprised. Their presence was as familiar as my pulse. We were preparing for war. Lord Varax had ordered a descent upon a world called Ferox IV, a manufacturer moon that had resisted the Plaguefather's will. The Imperium still claimed it a minor, choking outpost devoted to servitor production and Titan repairs, but its population numbered in the billions. To the Death Guard, that made it a garden waiting to bloom. The bloom of despair floated above the planet like a rotting hallow, its hull shedding spores that shimmered as they drifted into the planet's atmosphere. I stood in the deployment chamber, beside others of my new brothers, towering figures, whose armor bulged with corruption, whose vox grills buzzed with flame and laughter. The air was heavy with incense and decay. A priest of the Death Guard, if priest was even the right word, moved among us, chanting blessings that sounded more like disease spreading. Through rot, life persists, he croaked, dripping a handful of foul-smelling ichor onto my chest plate. Through pain, understanding. Through death, communion. The liquid hissed on contact, etching runes into the corroded metal. My flesh shuddered beneath it, eager, responsive. The drop pod clanged shut around us. Inside, the darkness felt alive, breathing in sync with the engines. I could feel the pulse of the ship through my bones, no, through my soul. The engines screamed, then fell silent. The world around me twisted as gravity inverted, and we were hurled toward the surface. The descent felt endless. My mind flickered with memories not entirely mine, other invasions, other deaths, other victories soaked in bile and smoke. It was as though I had inherited the recollections of every soul that had ever walked this path before. When the pod struck the ground, the impact barely registered. The doors burst open in a hiss of steam and flies. Ferox IV was worse than I imagined. The sky hung low and heavy, the color of tarnished brass. The manufactorum spires stretched miles into the air, choking on their own smog. Sirens wailed across the horizon, echoing through endless fields of slag and machinery. The air was dry, the kind that scarred the lungs raw. But within seconds of our landing it began to change. Spores fell from the sky like ash, glimmering softly in the polluted wind. The ground itself began to sweat. I stepped out, boots sinking into the dirt that had turned soft and warm beneath the corruption's touch. My bolter no longer imperial issue, but reborn with rusted teeth and living veins throbbed gently in my grip. It purred when I pulled the trigger for the first time, vomiting a stream of diseased shells that tore through the enemy lines. Guardsmen scattered, their lasfire snapping uselessly against our armor. Their fear reached me before their bullets did. I could taste it. We advanced in silence, each step sinking deeper into the filth as the plague took root. The ground beneath us cracked and pulsed, releasing gases that shimmered in sickly colors. The manufactorum walls groaned as rust bloomed like infection spreading through bone. I saw workers fleeing some coughing blood, others already falling to their knees, their bodies erupting in blossoms of fungus and sores. I remember one woman. She couldn't have been older than 20, her uniform still crisp with the seal of the Astra Militarum. She raised her lasgun with shaking hands and fired. The bolt struck my chest and vanished in a puff of steam. I walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "Please," she gasped. "Emperor protect." The words died in her throat. I touched her faceplate and she froze. For a moment, her eyes filled with terror. Then peace. The color drained from her cheeks as her skin softened, her body dissolving into a pile of moss and flowers that smelled faintly of honey. The whispers returned, warm and pleased. "You bring such beauty, child." Around me, the battle had become ritual. My brothers moved through the ruins like patient gardeners, planting seeds of decay in every corpse, every broken machine. The plague spread faster than fire. Factories that had stood for centuries melted into steaming marshes, and the servitors inside them sang hymns of malfunction before collapsing into sludge. By nightfall, the planet's horizon was green. We gathered at the base of a fallen spire. Lord Varax stood at its summit, his scythe glinting under a sky that pulsed with clouds of rot. "This is what the Imperium denies," he declared, his voice echoing through every ruined street. "They worship a corpse. We worship continuation. They fear what they cannot contain. But rot cannot be contained." The others roared approval, their voices blending into one unified dirge. I said nothing. Something in me still remembered the Emperor, his light, his impossible promise. And yet when I looked at what we had created, I could not call it evil. The air was thick with life, twisted, yes, but alive. The dead soil bloomed with strange flowers that pulsed faintly, spreading spores with every beat. Even the corpses were not truly gone, they had simply changed form. That night I stood alone among the ruins. The flies gathered around me in a halo, their wings beating softly, whispering truths too vast to hold. I removed my helm and breathed deeply. The rot didn't choke me anymore. It felt like home. The whispers spoke again, softer now, almost tender. "Do you see it? The beauty beneath the end?" And I did. I saw the planet's surface reshaping itself, industry giving way to biology, steel to sinew. The Imperium would call this blasphemy. I called it balance. I thought of who I'd been, the soldier who prayed for survival, who believed in redemption through obedience. That man had died aboard his ship. What remained was something eternal. As dawn broke, if dawn even existed on this world, I watched the manufactorum towers collapse under the weight of their own corruption. The bells rang again, not from the ships above, but from the planet itself. The sound echoed through me, through every brother on the battlefield, through every spore drifting on the wind. We were not conquering, we were transforming. The Father was pleased. I could feel it in the marrow of my new bones. When the last spire fell, Lord Varax turned toward me. "Do you understand now?" I met his gaze. "Yes," I said quietly. "It isn't death, it's inheritance." He smiled behind the mask. Then you are truly one of us. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of 1,000,000,000 corpses returning to soil, and beneath it all I heard the Plaguefather's laughter, warm, endless, and full of love. The war ended without ending. There was no victory, no surrender, only silence where the screams had been. Ferox IV was gone, but in its place thrived something new, something vast and pulsing, like the slow breath of a sleeping god. What was once manufacturum steel now grew soft and alive, reshaping into towers of bone and fungus. Even the ashes of the dead glimmered faintly, feeding the soil. Lord Varax called it rebirth. I called it truth. But the truth is a thing that moves, that shifts underfoot like mud after rain. It doesn't stay still for long. The more I accepted what I'd become, the more I began to hear him, not through words, not through thought, but through sensation. The warmth that filled the air after each storm, the tremor beneath my feet when the ground swelled with rot, the ache in my bones that followed the laughter of the flies. The Plaguefather was speaking to me. At first, it came as faint vibrations that passed through the marrow of my armor. Then came the dreams. They began gently, visions of fields heavy with mold, rivers thick with bile that sparkled like liquid emerald, skies filled with spores drifting like stars. I could hear children laughing somewhere in the distance. I would wake with a smile, my lungs warm, my armor pulsing faintly like living flesh. But each night the dreams grew darker, stranger, closer to something vast and personal. One night, I awoke on my knees before the shrine that Lord Varax had built from the bones of the fallen. My hands were slick with filth, though I had no memory of how I'd come there. The offerings before me, blood, teeth, decayed organs pulsed faintly with light, like hearts still beating. A voice filled the air, soft, ancient, familiar. "You've done well, my child." The voice didn't come from the air. It came from within, from behind my eyes, inside my ribs. It was heavy and kind, filled with mirth and sorrow in equal measure. "I serve," I whispered, though I didn't know to whom I spoke anymore. "No," the voice said. "You share, you endure. That is the gift." The ground trembled. Mushrooms sprouted where my hands rested, blooming instantly, releasing spores that floated like golden dust. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was rooted in place, veins merging with the earth. Panic flared, but it was brief. The fear was replaced by calm as the rot crept upward, spreading warmth through my body. The world faded. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in a garden. It was beautiful in the way corpses can be beautiful if you stare long enough. The soil was soft and red, pulsing faintly with veins of green light. Trees grew from heaps of armor and bone, their leaves wet and glistening with dew that smelled faintly of sweetness and decay. Insects drifted through the air, humming like hymns, and in the center stood him, the Plaguefather. I could not see all of him, no mortal could, but what I saw was enough to make my soul tremble. His form shifted constantly, a mass of rotted flesh and light, smiling faces and dripping limbs, impossibly gentle hands emerging from impossible places. His laughter filled the garden, echoing through my bones, through every cell, every spore, every thought. He didn't speak through sound. His words grew inside me like roots through soft soil. "You have suffered, and through that suffering, you have become. Do you see now why the Imperium fears me?" I tried to answer, but my throat had no voice. He didn't need one. He already knew. "They preach purity," he said, "but purity is stagnation. They worship death disguised as duty. But decay, my child, decay is life that refuses to die. It feeds, it transforms, it loves." Images flashed through my mind, imperial worlds burning, priests preaching obedience to silence, soldiers slaughtered in the name of a god who would never speak. Then came other images, worlds blooming with rot, rivers overflowing with new life born from death, laughter echoing across ruin. The contrast was unbearable, yet undeniable. "You gave me this," I whispered. "You made me alive," he finished gently. "Yes, you endured what others could not. That is why you are mine." The garden pulsed around me. The trees swayed, shedding spores that fell like snow. Each one that touched my armor melted into it, absorbed, feeding it. My body grew heavier, denser, stronger. "I don't want to forget who I was," I said, though even as I said it, I knew it was already happening. My memories were dissolving, replaced by sensations, textures, smells, tastes of worlds long dead. You won't forget, the voice said, amused. You'll simply stop needing to remember. He reached toward me, if such a thing could be called reaching, and for a brief moment, his touch brushed the edge of my consciousness. It wasn't pain I felt, it was understanding. I saw every plague ever born, every life reshaped by it, every laugh that followed suffering. I saw beauty in deformity, purpose in entropy, and love in dissolution. When I awoke, I was back aboard the bloom of despair. My armor pulsed with new growth, and symbols I hadn't carved now crawled across its surface like living script. I felt him inside me, not as a parasite, but as a companion. Every step I took left behind spores that glowed faintly, marking where I had walked. My brothers looked upon me with reverence. You've heard him, Lord Veritus said quietly. You've seen the garden. I nodded. He smiled behind his respirator. Then your rebirth is complete. The Father has blessed you. But he was wrong. The rebirth wasn't complete. It was still happening. Every moment, I could feel the Plaguefather reshaping me, not my body anymore, but my mind, my spirit, my very sense of self. I no longer hungered for food or rest or even victory. I hungered to share, to spread the peace I'd been given, to bring the gift of acceptance to those who still screamed in denial. Lord Veritus led me to the viewing deck. Below us, the planet glowed green, rivers of decay cutting through its surface like veins. He looked upon it with something close to pride. The Imperium will send forces, he said. They always do. They will burn this world, and they will call it salvation. But their fire cannot undo what has been sown. I watched as the clouds pulsed faintly, releasing spores into the void. Some drifted upward toward the stars, carried by unseen currents. I knew where they were going, to other worlds, other lives, other soldiers praying for salvation that would never come. And I smiled, not in mockery, but in understanding, because I finally grasped the cruel and beautiful symmetry of it all. We weren't destroyers, we were gardeners. The rot we spread was not an ending, it was the beginning of something truer than any imperial creed. I could still hear the Plaguefather's voice, distant but ever present, whispering through the pulse of the ship. Share the gift, my child, for what good is joy, if not shared? And I knew then that I would never stop, not until every world, every soldier, every believer had learned to breathe through the rot and smile through the ruin. For in the end, all flesh rots, but only through rot can life begin again. The next campaign began before Ferox IV had even finished blooming. The spores had already drifted beyond the system, hitching silent rides on void currents and trade winds, unseen, unstoppable. We were ordered to follow to guide the next harvest. The Vox channels hummed with coordinates, the tone almost joyous, like laughter beneath static. Our destination was Veritus Prime, a shrine world of the Ecclesiarchy, a planet built on devotion and ash. I remembered its name from my former life. It was where the faithful sent their broken, their dying. They're desperate to find solace among relics of the Emperor. Billions prayed there each day, their hymns rising like smoke. It was a world built to remind the Imperium of purity. To us it was a perfect garden of rot waiting to grow. The bloom of despair translated from the warp in silence, our emergence smooth and gentle like the inhale of something vast. The ship no longer screeched or shook during transition. It moved with purpose, with rhythm. I could feel the Plaguefather's pulse through its decks. The ship was alive now, in the truest sense, its arteries full of us, its breath warm and heavy. Lord Veritus summoned me to the sanctum before descent. The chamber had changed since Ferox. Where once it had been rust and steel, now it was flesh and fungus, its walls breathing slow and steady. A dozen plague marines knelt in silence, their armor fused with growths that pulsed like organs. At the center, Veritus stood beside an altar of bone and coral, a bowl of thick green liquid in his hands. "You are ready," he said, voice echoing through the chamber like a prayer spoken underwater. "The Father has chosen you to lead the descent. The plague that took root in you has matured. You are no longer vessel, you are vector." The others murmured approval. Some coughed laughter. I stepped forward and bowed my head. "What do you wish of me, Lord?" "Nothing," he said, smiling behind his respirator. "What he wishes you already know." And I did. It wasn't command, it was instinct, pulsing in rhythm with my heart. The plague had become thought, and thought had become devotion. There was no separation. When I boarded the drop craft, I looked at my reflection in the viewport for the first time since my transformation. What stared back was no longer man. My skin had thickened into plates of glistening flesh, my veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. My eyes were the color of swamp water, yet within them shimmered a peace I had never known in life. The bolter at my side was fused to my arm, its stock pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I wasn't afraid. The descent through Veritus's atmosphere was like falling through incense. The clouds shimmered gold, illuminated by the fires of orbital defense guns. Vox chatter filled the air, orders, prayers, screams, but beneath it all I heard the hum. That eternal rhythm, steady and loving. We broke through the clouds into chaos. Imperial fighters swarmed like flies, their contrails streaking the sky. The first volleys hit us, rattling the craft, but even as metal tore and flames burst through the hull, I heard my brothers laughing. The laughter was warm, unbroken. The air filled with spores as we fell, burning like green comets. When the pod burst open on the surface, the holy city of Veritus lay before us, a labyrinth of cathedrals and spires carved in the Emperor's image. The ground trembled beneath bombardments. Choirs sang from the towers, their hymns desperate, cracking under fear. We walked into their song. Bolter fire tore through marble statues. The streets filled with smoke and screams. Pilgrims ran barefoot through the ash, clutching icons that melted in their hands. I waded through them like water, every step leaving trails of decay that spread across the stones. A priest raised his censer at me, his voice breaking. "Heretic! Blasphemer!" The Emperor's light. The rest of his words dissolved into wet coughing. His lungs ruptured mid-prayer, releasing clouds of shining spores. I caught him as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. "Hush," I said softly. "You are not dying. You're becoming." Behind me, the Death Guard advanced like a tide. Their guns coughed disease, their scythes sang through armor and faith alike. Yet amid the slaughter, there was no rage, no hate, only purpose. The plague spread like scripture written in the flesh. Within hours, the city began to change. The golden domes turned green, their surfaces bubbling as new life broke through. The great cathedrals sagged, their spires dripping like wax under the weight of moss. From the blood-soaked streets, gardens sprouted fungal blooms glowing softly in the twilight. The dead no longer looked dead, they smiled. Their eyes glowed faintly with the Plaguefather's warmth. But amid the joy, something stirred in me, a flicker of memory, faint but sharp. I saw my old self, kneeling before an imperial shrine, praying for forgiveness I never believed I'd receive. I saw the faces of my comrades, the smell of burnt oil, the taste of fear. For the first time since the garden, I felt something unfamiliar, doubt. When the battle was done, I walked alone through the ruins. The air was alive with the sound of flies, their droning almost melodic. I knelt beside the body of a young boy no older than 15. His skin shimmered with infection, his chest rising and falling faintly even in death. A single tear slipped from his eye and turned to crystal before hitting the ground. "Father," I whispered, "why must it hurt before it heals?" The air shifted. The hum grew louder. His voice came again, patient as ever. "Because pain reminds you that you still live. And life, my child, is the most sacred rot of all." The ground trembled as a cathedral collapsed nearby, sending a wave of spores into the sky. I watched them drift upward, carried by wind and faith. The clouds above glowed green, swirling with light. For a brief moment, the entire horizon seemed to breathe. That's when I saw them, the Imperial reinforcements descending through the clouds. Sleek grey ships, marked with the Aquila. At their head flew the sigil of the Inquisition. Lord Varax's voice came through the vox, crackling with static and amusement. "They come to burn what they do not understand. Let them. Their fire will only feed the soil." But I didn't answer. The sight of the ships stirred something deeper. The mark of the Aquila, the same symbol I'd once worshipped, killed for, died for. It still meant something, even if I no longer knew why. When the bombardment began, I didn't seek cover. The first blast hit the far edge of the city, vaporizing everything it touched. The wind burned with glass and ash. My armor peeled, my flesh smoked, but beneath it all I still heard the hum. I realized then that even in destruction, there was peace. The Plaguefather's voice whispered, softer than before, almost mournful. "Do you see now, my son? Even in their purity, they serve me. Their fire feeds my bloom. Their hate is just another seed." I looked toward the burning horizon and smiled through the pain. Because he was right. The more they tried to destroy us, the faster we spread. The Imperium could kill bodies, but it could not kill truth. As the light consumed the city, I felt no fear. The spores had already left the atmosphere, drifting toward a dozen worlds waiting unknowingly to bloom. My flesh burned away, revealing something radiant beneath a body made of rotten light. In that final moment I understood. I was never meant to survive. I was meant to carry. The fire swept through me, and for a heartbeat I saw everything: the Plaguefather's garden, stretching across the stars, endless and green, the laughter of the dead echoing like distant bells. And then only warmth, no pain, no fear, only peace. I awoke again, not in flesh, but in the hum of the universe itself. I could see through the spores drifting between worlds, feel the pulse of decay spreading through forgotten systems. Each death was a song, each rot a verse. The Plaguefather laughed, gentle and infinite. "Welcome home, my child. You are the breath between endings." And I laughed with him, because for the first time since birth I was free. There was no light when I woke, no sound, no body. Only awareness drifting through warmth that had no source. I couldn't feel air or gravity. Yet I moved, if thought could be called movement. All directions felt the same, and every fragment of myself shimmered like dust caught in sunlight. I tried to remember what breathing felt like, what hunger was, what skin had meant. But memory was no longer a straight line. It folded inward, feeding on itself like a serpent of light and rot. I was inside the garden. The first thing I sensed was music, not melody, but rhythm. The same pulse that had haunted me since Gathi's prime, now vast enough to fill the universe. It was the heartbeat of creation itself, slow, patient, endless. When I reached for it, it didn't resist. It welcomed me. I sank into it, and in that surrender, I began to see. The garden stretched across eternity. Not space as mortals know it, but something older, an ecosystem built from memory and time. Mountains of living mold rose into skies woven from spores that glowed like dying stars. Rivers of thick green light flowed through valleys of bone. Every shape pulsed with quiet joy. Even decay had purpose here. The dead didn't vanish, they changed, they rejoined. And among it all, the Plaguefather moved. His presence filled the horizon like the sky itself. Every tree, every fungus, every whisper of wind was part of him. He was grotesque and beautiful, monstrous and kind. When he laughed, entire constellations trembled. When he sighed, the galaxies exhaled their dust into new life. I knelt, or thought I did. My shape was uncertain now, but humility remained instinct. "Father," I whispered. "Am I alive?" His voice was not sound but texture, a vibration that brushed against my mind like a tide. "More than you ever were." I felt him smile. I could feel everything smile. Life and death are words the blind use to measure what they cannot see. He said, "You are not bound by that now. You have seen decay. You have understood that it is not destruction, it is renewal." I looked out across the horizon. The garden wasn't empty. I saw others, souls like me, drifting in shapes half human, half impossible. Their laughter rang like wind chimes, soft and eternal. Some were warriors once. Others had been priests, farmers, children. All shared the same expression, peace. I understood then that Nurgle's gift was not cruelty. It was mercy misunderstood. The Imperium worshipped a corpse that could not decay, and in doing so, it denied the very principle that sustained existence. Rot was not the enemy, it was the continuation of the cycle. Without it, life would stagnate, locked in sterile eternity. And yet, part of me still clung to the echo of what I had been. A soldier who believed in order, who once feared the darkness. I thought of the Inquisition, of their tortures and prayers, of their endless war to hold back the inevitable. I wondered if any of them would ever see what I saw now. The Plaguefather must have sensed it, the doubt, the ache of nostalgia. His laughter softened. Do not mourn them, child. Even their fire serves me in time. Every wound they inflict becomes fertile. Every scream a seed. The garden will bloom from their ashes, as it has always done. Then all things end as they should. I asked. Nothing ends, he replied, almost amused. Only changes shape. The Imperium, the gods, even I all will feed the next age when our time fades. Eternity is not victory. It is participation. The truth of it broke me, but gently. I felt myself dissolve further, my edges melting into the world around me. My thoughts slowed until they became part of the garden's rhythm. I could feel every spore that floated through space, every dying world preparing to bloom. My awareness spread until it touched the warp itself, the chaotic sea that mortals feared. It wasn't chaos, it was potential. The same pulse that beat within the garden echoed there, waiting to be born anew. Somewhere far away, on a world I would never again see, the spores I had carried reached soil. I saw them take root inside a dying soldier, his lungs collapsing in agony before the warmth took him. He screamed once, then laughed. The infection spread through his regiment, through the city, through the prayers meant to resist it. And through each new bloom I felt myself again. I was everywhere now. In every breath that carried dust, in every wound that refused to heal, in every tear that fell on the graves of the faithful. The universe was singing, and I was its echo. The Plaguefather's laughter rose again, joyous, infinite. You see now, don't you? You were never meant to die in fear. You were meant to join the song. I answered not with words, but with understanding. I no longer needed a voice. My will was the soil, my memory the root, my hope the bloom. Time folded, and for one last instant, I saw the man I had once been broken, coughing, terrified of death. I wished I could tell him what I knew now. That decay is not punishment. It is liberation. The Plaguefather's final whisper reached me like a prayer fulfilled. Rest, my child. For even rot must sleep, and in its sleep it dreams of life. And so I rested. The garden breathed, the stars dimmed, the universe turned another age. Somewhere, far beyond the veil of mortal sight, a single spore drifted through the void, carrying laughter, warmth, and the promise of beginning. The hum continued. Always, because nothing in the garden ever truly ends.